Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything. Today, continuing with our Drawing Every Country in the World's Flag series. And I do apologize if it sounds a little weird here. I think my house is falling apart. We got nasty storms here. And speaking of nasty, we're going into a country today with a very, very nasty history. We're going to be doing Cambodia in Southeast Asia. So Cambodia, Laos to the north, Vietnam to the east, and to the west is Thailand. This country, put the kids to bed. This is going to be an adults only episode. Just kidding, not really, but it's going to be pretty gruesome because this country probably is one of the most nihilistic examples of what communism actually does in practice, and we will be getting into that. Other than that, Cambodian people, descendants of the Angkor Empire, which was a powerful Southeast Asian empire, kind of around like the 10th and 13th century, and was actually one of the richer civilizations in the area. So most Cambodian people consider themselves to be descendants of that. And they did face some issues with like neighboring Thailand and the Cham people, which is now Vietnam. Just kind of a lot of back and forth, a lot of kind of ideological struggles too between like Hinduism and Buddhism in that particular part of the world. So some of the earlier like pre-modern time kind of wars and conflicts in that region sort of stem from that. And then kind of in the modern time, the king of Cambodia places the country under French protection. So they become a part of French Indochina in 1863. Well, actually officially in 1887. And then leading into the modern age, France kind of is starting to lose its Southeast Asian empire, and World War II is a big part of that. So they lose Southeast Asia. The Japanese take it over, and then following the defeat of Japan in the Axis, it gains. It goes back to France, but then gains full independence in 1975. I'm sorry, 1953. 1975 is kind of when stuff starts popping off, and this is where the Cambodian history gets pretty nasty. So, as you know, we're kind of well into the Cold War at this point, and the Vietnam War is popping off as well. So you've got the United States kind of leading the West, and then the communist second world is China, Soviet Union, and the communist world was not exactly an aligned bloc. So the Soviets as well as the Chinese had they had separate interests in Southeast Asia. So China did have a fear of being completely swallowed up in a Soviet bloc. So there was a lot of Soviet interest in having like a unified Indochina under Soviet rule, which would pretty much surround communist China by Soviet power. And that was not something that really sat well with them. So you do have a lot of kind of back and forth there between all the great powers. Poor little Cambodia kind of stuck in the middle, and can't really talk about Cambodia without talking about the great purges of the Khmer Rouge, possibly right up there in the kind of like the Maoist sense, just one of the most nihilistic communist parties in the world. Unfortunately, yeah, Cambodia did have a lot of human suffering and genocide. That's not controversial or exaggeration to call it genocide either. It absolutely was. They lost something like a third of their population during this. Anywhere from 1 million to 3.1 million people, depending on who you believe. So 1/3 of the entire population that's absolutely catastrophic. But and China today, they try to distance themselves from some of the more barbaric aspects of like these communist regimes. So like China and North Korea aren't like completely aligned, depending or contrary to what like you hear, right? There's never really like a completely unified communist bloc in the world where, a lot of the times, countries like North Korea are kind of like an embarrassment to China. It's like the little brother or whatever that just doesn't behave when you go out, so you don't want him around or something like that. So that's kind of how they view their relationship with them. And yeah, they try to kind of do the same thing as far as like Cambodia's history. They try to downplay like this wasn't like Chinese communism or stuff like that, but China pretty much directly funded the Khmer Rouge, and it's pretty much a proven kind of like well-known fact now. Pol Pot, he was the leader of the Khmer Rouge, and he was educated in France, right? Like a lot of these communists and Jacobin types were. He went to Beijing in the height of the Cultural Revolution, like 65 to 66. And yeah, China provided about 90% of the funding to democratic Kampuchea, which is Cambodia. So, yeah, Pol Pot's men as well were Paris educated, so they were educated in the ways of the left, the absolute destruction and annihilation of tradition. We talk about this in the French Revolution, right? All that year zero crap, where all tradition must be, what the French did. They got rid of the church, but then they also got rid of the existing systems of measurement. They got rid of the calendar, so everything just started over. And the French revolutionaries, they look like amateurs compared to what the Khmer Rouge did. The Khmer Rouge basically, I don't want to defend communists, but in fairness to the Bolsheviks, right? So here James Goes Everything is he's turning into a leftist here. So when the Bolsheviks took over Russia, they at least they like sacked the gold from like all the banks, and they kept all the gold. The Khmer Rouge destroyed everything, even the currency. So like when they took the banks in Cambodia, the banking centers, they burned all the money. So they destroyed physical property too. So this was literally like, we have to destroy everything in this country, so it doesn't get like more nihilistic than that. So these guys aren't like I don't want to get too off track here, but I want to talk about like ideological Marxists versus communists, and yeah, there's a lot of overlap, but they're not sitting around like all these college professor dorks talking about, well, the relationship between labor and capital and all that nonsense. No, they just destroyed. So they were just into the whole year zero thing. They didn't really care about like the economics or anything like that. So it's always good to kind of know the difference between all that stuff, just in case you never want to see it happen again. So the Khmer Rouge, they destroy family, religion, song, dance, the existing royalty, tradition. So everything is supposed to be rebuilt from ground zero as an individual, basically kind of like you're just a piece of clay that can be molded into the state's new ideology, right? So that was the Khmer Rouge, and they were so devastating. This created a massive refugee crisis. A lot of Cambodians ended up in the United States. After that conflict, the North Vietnamese, and they're kind of embroiled in their own problems at the time. The Vietnam War is kind of closing out by this point, so this is like 78. So communist Vietnam basically invades Cambodia just as kind of like a mercy killing, because it's like, all right, this is like too much, like almost, like even for us, like we can't have this going on next door. So that's pretty much that dark period in Cambodian history. And yeah, so you have some occupation by Vietnam after that. So there's like a lot of coalitions of like leftover Khmer Rouge, old school traditional like Cambodian nationalists, some Chinese that are kind of having still conflicts to that day. So that kind of keeps going until 1991. 1991 Paris agreements ended that civil war, and they mandated elections. So kind of brought in like democracy and all that stuff in the Western flavor. But Cambodia pretty scarred to this day. You can actually go there, and for the most part, you'll be okay. Cambodia, Southeast Asia in general, and I know I got a lot of Southeast Asian fans on this channel, so you can leave something in the comments if you know a little something about Cambodia. But their economy is pretty much total like Wild West, like free market, right? So a lot of digital nomad types like Southeast Asia and Cambodia, just because the economy is almost completely unregulated. Like if you want to set up a gas station in Cambodia, just go do it. Like it really is the Wild West. And but the scars of like what happened in that country still run so deep that it's still a place you kind of got to be careful of, especially like landmines, right? So there's you really have to be careful, like in rural Cambodia. Do not travel, because there's still a lot of active landmines, like from the Khmer Rouge days and the war. So be careful. And unfortunately as well, because it's so Wild West, there's a lot of vice in Cambodia, so a lot of human trafficking there. A lot of people go there to find wives and other things, and it's not always on the up and up as far as like talking about age and stuff like that. And that's James Draws Everything Family Channel. It's about as far as that, as far into that as we'll get. But yeah, it's a country. It's got a lot of scars, but hopefully, they can get over that. It does have a lot of kind of like population problems, just because they literally massacred like their entire population almost. So it does have a very young population, and that brings its own challenges, but also kind of leads you to think that maybe things will change in the future. Obviously, if it's not an aging population, the youth, the future. So there's that. And yeah, there's still trials today, like with the United Nations against like what the Khmer Rouge did. And yeah, but what about their flag? There's so much to talk about with a lot of these Southeast Asian countries, because their histories they're pretty crazy. They're all over the place. And so I was busy talking about that the whole time, and I didn't even mention about how this is a pretty intricate little flag we got here. So we got 3 horizontal bands of blue, red, and blue. And then we got that little white temple in the middle. That's the Angkor Wat. And that's kind of like a traditional Cambodian structure. And it's the only flag to have an actual building in its design. Now there are other flags that have buildings in the flag, but they're not a specific building. So this Angkor Wat temple, this great historical landmark in Cambodia, that's actually what it looks like. It's not just a generic building. So I think like San Marino, Portugal, Spain, they have some small like generic buildings in their flags, but this is a specific building. It's not just a generic one. All right. So red and blue, they don't really have any meaning. They're just traditional Cambodian colors. But yeah, that is the flag of Cambodia. So let me know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video.